کہاں جائے آخر بیابان ہر سو، شکستہ ہے پہلو اکیلی ہے زہرا، رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا۔ در فاطمہ کو جلایا ہے تم نے، کیا وعدہ اپنا بھلایا ہے تم نے، در فاطمہ کو جلایا ہے تم نے، کیا وعدہ اپنا بھلایا ہے تم نے، تماچے نہ مارو مسلمانوں جاؤ، علی کو بلاؤ، اکیلی ہے زہرا، رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا۔ بیاں کس جا کر کروں درد اپنا، ہے غیروں کی دنیا نہیں کوئی اپنا، بیاں کس سے جا کر کروں درد اپنا، ہے غیروں کی دنیا نہیں کوئی اپنا، کوئی جا کے بابا سے کہہ دو یہ جا کر کہ لے جاؤ آ کر، اکیلی ہے زہرا، رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا۔ اے لخت جگر حسن ابن حیدر، یہ نانا کے پہلو میں سونے نہ دے گر، اے لخت جگر حسن ابن حیدر، یہ نانا کے پہلو میں سونے نہ دے گر، تم آ جانا پہلو میں سو جانا ماں کے بقی میں، یہاں پر اکیلی ہے زہرا، رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا، اکیلی ہے زہرا۔ شہ کربلا نے کہا رو کے ماں سے، یہ مظلوم بیٹے نے مظلوم ماں سے، شہ کربلا نے کہا رو کے ماں سے، ये मजलूम बेटे ने मजलूम माँ से, अकेला हूँ मैं भी अकेली है ज़ैनब, अकेले हैं बाबा अकेली है ज़हरा, रोने पे पहरा मसाइब का सहरा, अकेली है ज़हरा अकेली है ज़हरा। सलावत।
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتحدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا والشفيع ذنوبنا سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين صاحب العصر والزمان خليفة الرحمن إمام الإنس والجان ولعن الله أعداهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد فقد قال الله وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أَوَمَنْ كَانَ مَيْتًا فَأَحْيَيْنَاهُ وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُ نُورًا يَمْشِي بِهِ فِي النَّاسِ صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Once again, it is such an honor for me to address the Edmonton Jamaat on these days of Fatimiyya. And if you recall, I was with you in the previous two majalis as well. And I want to continue that topic from that to make these 4 lectures now a series. And just as a quick reminder, in light of the fact that we are here to commemorate and remember that woman of light actually, who has left behind a legacy. In her 18 years of life, I find it incredible that she was able now to leave a legacy and a path for emulation for any member of any group or any gender, or it doesn't matter what stage you're at. You could be young or old, you could be male or female, married, not married, doesn't matter. There's something to now take away from her life. And one thing that I had started now with all of you before, talking about her selflessness. And we look at the fact that, whether it's the way that, her father, the Holy Prophet, described her as Abiha, the mother of her father. That's how much love that she had. That's how much she would put her own difficulties aside and look after him. Or the fact that she was the lone defender of the wilayat of her husband, Amir al-Mu'mineen. Or the fact that she would teach her children, al-jaru thumma daru, that first others then you. This symbolism of selflessness that she was is a lesson for you and I. And I mentioned now in the past 2 lectures about the fact that during this pandemic now, we have to make it a point to reach out to others. Be that light for their darkness. The verse of the Quran, that half of the verse that I read for you in the khutbah from Surah An'am, verse number 122, Allah says that you were spiritually dead. أَوَمَنْ كَانَ مَيْتًا. You were dead. You're spiritually dead. فَأَحْيَيْنَاهُ. I gave you hayat. I gave you life. وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُ نُورًا يَمْشِي بِهِ فِي النَّاسِ. I gave you light so you can walk with that light amongst the people. Meaning, illuminate their path of darkness. And we talked about several ways to do that. We talked about, khidmat. We talked about, what I want to speak about tonight is that if we decide to be somebody who now empathizes with those around us, is there for us. We know a person now is somebody who is in darkness, going through a difficulty, how do we approach that person? Because sometimes I find that the error that we do is sometimes we walk in with a solution approach first, a solution first approach, as opposed to a listen first approach. I mean, you know what? I know exactly what they need. You know what? For you, you have to do this, do that, do this. And sometimes it's not what they want to hear. It's not what they want to hear. No one's asking you to swoop in like a superhero and save the day. Nobody here wants to hear, if you did this better, look after your body, exercise, try this, try. It's like, you know what? I don't need to hear the lecture right now. Now, as much as you think that they could really benefit from this advice, you have to read the person. And how you read the person is to develop a listen first approach. I tell you, if we learned how to listen properly, a lot of our problems domestically, as a community, individually, all of them, a lot of them now would be tackled. I tell you, the major issue I find in marriages is communication. And we as males, we are result-oriented communicators, and our wives are process-oriented communicators. Meaning what? That if I hear something, the first thing I want to do is, how can I fix this? And I realize sometimes that my wife doesn't want me to fix it. If, for example, something my family has done, or someone I know, or my friend has said something to upset her, okay, you know what, tomorrow I'll talk. So, whoa, I'm not asking you to talk to your mom, or talk to your friend, or call up your brother, no, I'm not. Don't do that. In fact, if you do that, it'll make me more upset. You're like, what do you want then, right? So initially it's like, just hear me out. Let me now say it. That process of me talking and you listening now is huge for me. It's half the battle. Let me get it all out. Okay. And that's exactly how we should approach somebody that we are now there. Like I said in the second lecture now, last weekend I believe, is that sometimes all they need is for someone to sit there in their darkness with them. That's it. That's it. Sometimes talk about everything but the reason why they're in the darkness. That's all they need. Talk about the weather, talk about sports, talk about anything you want. But we have to learn to be better listeners. If our elders and our community listened to our youth group, we'd be somewhere else. If our youth now heard the advice of their elders, we'd be somewhere else right now. If the parents now heard the kids when they were getting older, they would be somewhere else. If the kids now took the advice of the parents, etc., etc., it all goes down to listening. To listening. The power of listening is very, very important. I get phone calls from people who have hit rock bottom, and they call me for half an hour, 35 minutes, 40 minutes. They talk, and they talk, and they talk, and I don't say a word. I let them know that I'm on the line. Yes, okay, yes, okay, all right. But I let them get it all out. And sometimes they don't even ask me for any of my advice. They simply say, you know what, Malana, I feel so much better. Thank you very much. Khudafis. I'm like, I didn't even say a word to that person. They can literally talk themselves out of their darkness. But they never had that. It's them in the four walls, right? Let them talk it out. If that means they're unreasonable, if that means that's so be it. Now, mind you, to a certain extent, right? I mean, if it affects your own mental health, you have to balance it out as well. But the first thing to do when you enter this, now you say, okay, you know what, I'm going to go ahead, call the person up. I know something's going on with them. Let me call them up and say, okay, what's happening? What is the approach? The first approach is with your ears. Okay? Don't assume that you have everything figured out. We, for some reason, are masters of giving unsolicited advice. Nobody asked you for your advice, man. No one asked you, what do you think? Oh, you know what, if I know exactly what you need. Do this, do that. Maybe that worked for you. It doesn't work for me. The Holy Prophet has a beautiful hadith when it comes to listening. Listening. And this is actually quoted by Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He says that a man approached the Holy Prophet and says, Ya Rasulullah ma'al ilm. What is knowledge? Listen to now this breakdown of what knowledge is or what ilm is in the eyes of the Holy Prophet. He says, qala insat, silence. The man says, thumma ma, what else is knowledge? Qala istima'a, listen very carefully. Don't hear things, listen to them very carefully. Thumma ma'a, what else ya Rasulullah? Qalu al-hifz, retain the things you have heard. Silence, listen very carefully, retain what you've heard. Thumma ma'a ya Rasulullah, what else is knowledge? Qalu amalun bih, now act on what you've retained. Silence, listen very carefully, retain what you've heard, act on what you've retained. Thumma ma, he says finally, the Prophet says, al-nashr, now spread what you've acted upon. Oh, these treasures, I tell you guys, these treasures are just that. They're treasures for us in our life to better ourselves, to better our relationship and our connection with other people. Look what the Prophet is saying and look how we're going on spreading all sorts of knowledges and this prescription and that, this and that. We haven't even read it properly. We're forwarding that WhatsApp, forwarded as received. I love that statement. That statement. It's as if, you know what? If this contains garbage, it's not me. I simply took it as somebody. But Baba, you're responsible. You're responsible, right? Like, why did you forward it if you didn't even listen to the 14-minute? First of all, why are you sending a 14-minute video to begin with? It's beyond me. Please, those of you who like to send 14-minute videos on WhatsApp, please don't do that, okay? 30 seconds, 90 seconds at tops, I can do. Anything above 4 or 5 minutes, I'm sorry. I am sorry. I can barely hear myself for 5 minutes. Forget anybody else. Okay, I don't want a 14-minute video. But now I know you haven't heard it. It contains absolutely useless information. If you used to simply gurgle with salt water, then COVID-19 will not affect you. Come on, man. And now you're, to your 81 WhatsApp groups now. And people actually start to believe that. So all night long, COVID and no mask. Why? No, I don't need a mask. I gargled that night with salt water. Where did you get that from? From WhatsApp. Right? So we spread. We do number 5, the Prophet says, before we even do the first 4. We haven't even listened to it properly, heard it properly. The Prophet says silence, listening very carefully, retention, practicing, and then you spread. But look at the role of listening now. Silence and listening are very, very close together. He says you will never get anywhere. You won't understand yourself or the person beside you until and unless you begin to be quiet and open up your ears. Don't cut them off. Let them get it all out. Listen to what their problem is. If they don't want a solution, don't give them a solution. Sometimes people know what they need to do. They just cannot do it. They don't have the capacity. They don't have the willpower. Fine. People know, you know what? If I just cut down on my sugar, I can drop 40 pounds. Okay, that's easier said than done. When you open up your pantry, you see all sorts of different types of chocolates and chocolate chips and chocolate covered this and chocolate covered that. And it's just so hard, right? So a listen first approach. We have to now walk in and understand that if I'm going to show these people empathy, the first thing is to have the power of listening. Along with the power of listening is to show them that I'm listening. Again, it goes back to marriages, to communities, to communication in general. You're talking to your spouse, or she's talking to you, let's say, or they're talking to you, let's say, and they're opening up about a horrible moment they had on the day. I don't have a good day. They're down. They're in bed. They can't move. The weather is destroying them. And you ask them, are you okay? What's going on? And they start to actually open up to you. And there you are on your phone. Yeah, no, I'm here. Don't worry. I just have to respond. I just have to respond. Go ahead. I know. Okay. I know. You're down. Your head hurts. I get it. Yeah. Whoa. Right? You approach a person, you call them, right? And they're talking to you. And meanwhile, you're having a conversation off the phone with somebody beside you. So, oh really? Oh my God! That really. Can you do me a favor? Just put the stove down for a second. Just one. Yeah. You just put the water on, please. I need a coffee. Yeah. No, I'm here. What is that listening? Like, what message are we sending these people? Right? The Quran speaks about those who don't listen to be the motivation behind God creating the hellfire. Can you imagine for a moment? Surah Al-Araf, verse number 179. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَلَقَدْ زَرَعْنَا لِجَهَنَّمًا كَثِيرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ. From the majority of the men and the jinn who are in the hellfire, they will have three ingredients or three attributes. لهم قلوبا لا يفقهون بها ولهم عيون لا يبصرون بها ولهم أذان لا يسمعون بها. Three things that will distinguish them from everybody else. They have hearts, but nothing truly penetrated inside that heart. Nothing did. Everything was surface level. Everything was fairy dust, everything was hokey pokey, everything was fluff, everything was, the deen is fluff, the life is fluff, skipping through the meadows, blah, blah, blah. There was no sort of movement to penetrate inside, no. Even their worship was only sort of physical, up and down, up and down. Their Ramadan was a hunger strike. Their Hajj was nothing but a long flight. That's it. Nothing actually traveled deep inside the heart. وَلَهُمْ أَعْيُونَ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ بِهَا. They had eyes, but they never saw things for what they're looking at everything. They never saw things for its reality. وَلَهُمْ أَذَانٌ لَا يَسْمَعُونَ بِهَا. Oh, they had ears. They never heard anything. Never heard anything. This advice, this calling, that calling, this speech, that speech, nothing. There are people who sit there hours and hours in front of lectures and speeches, and that speaker is addressing them to a T. Everyone in the room knows this guy sitting right in front of the member. I'm really hoping he's listening. Looking at the alim speaking, but nothing going in. Nothing going in. Or he's thinking, or she's thinking, that this is really a speech that A, B, and C should really listen to. Baba, it's for you, man. That's why when Imam Sadiq, as I mentioned in the first majlis now, when he describes the types of hearts, al-qalbu mankus, that qalb that is inverted, al-qalbu matbu, he says, that heart that is sealed, nothing goes in, nothing goes out. There's advice coming at you, but it's bouncing off of you. It's ricocheting off you. It's not actually settling inside of you. The verse goes on, these people are like cattle, like cows. In fact, they're worse. They're people who are heedless. Heedless. They're completely carefree. They're just, they don't really care. Nothing really affects them. I would often wonder why, an example I've given before, I would often wonder why is cattle given as an example? Why, of all the imageries that God could have used, he used cattle? And you stop and you think about what a cow does when things around that cow are a little bit chaotic. You stand there in front of a group of pigeons, and you shoot a gun in the air. They'll do what? They'll fly off. There's, I don't know, a horse, let's say, for example, grazing or eating in grass, and you drive by him and you give a nice long horn of your car, they'll pop up and look around what's going on. Correct? A squirrel crossing the road now, you see him coming, the squirrel sees you coming towards him, they look at you for a second, and then they'll run away. But a cow doesn't any of that. A cow does zero. You can sit there and you can shoot a gun at the cow's head in the air. It won't move. You can drive by his head at 90 kilometers an hour. It won't move. Nothing. You can stomp the ground. You can make a loud sound. Nothing. Just sitting there, grazing away. Doesn't really care. Nothing affects him. Allah says these people, لَهُمْ قُلُوبًا لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا وَلَهُمْ أَعْيُونًا لَا يُبْصِرُونَ بِهَا وَلَهُمْ عَدَانٌ لَا يَسْمَعُونَ بِهَا. They're just like cattle. All of these warnings and warnings and warnings Nothing is penetrating inside of them. Not their ears, their eyes, or their heart. Nothing, Baba. Nothing. And people like that who don't understand how to listen are the reason why Allah does not say these people will only be in the hellfire. The verse now, the tone of the verse is, Allah looks at people like that and gets motivated to create the hellfire. Scary. Scary. We have to understand that if we're going to walk into a situation where we want to help somebody, the approach has to be to listen. We simply have to be better listeners. And it becomes a challenge day in and day out because there's so many distractions around us. Put all of it away. There's nothing better than to put everything away, all devices upside down, put on don't disturb, close the door, it doesn't matter, and look the person in the eye, if they're your mahram, and give them your full undivided attention. The Prophet of Allah would do two things when people talk to him. Number one, he would not look anywhere else. He would physically move to be right in front of them, shoulder to shoulder, eye to eye. Number one. Number two, he would never cut them off. Ever cut them off. Let them get it out. They're wandering, they're stuttering, they can't get the words out. Don't assume that you know what the end of their sentence is. There's nothing sometimes more demeaning. So the first thing I want to mention tonight is the power of listening. The power of sama', the power to listen to people. If you are somebody who likes to reach out to people, look, I know things are struggling, then please do not give them advice unless they ask, what do you think I should do? Then you give them advice. Even then, make it a very non-committal advice. Just say, look, this is what worked for me. It might work for you. I don't know. It's up to you. Don't assume that your medication and your regime and your diet and the way you handle things and what you watch all will work on A, B, and C. It won't sometimes. Everyone has their own path towards recovery. But if you decide now, and it's a very noble thing to do, by the way, to share in someone's darkness, walk in with a listen first attitude, please. The second thing that we have to now walk into, if we're going to empathize and we're going to actually be that source of light, is to understand where this person is coming from. So if you know a little bit of their background, you can probably understand why they're in darkness. Okay, troubled marriage, a lot of self-image issues, maybe toxic friendships. And that will give us the necessary tools we need to be there for that person. Remember, I mentioned to all of you, if I think I did, if I'm not mistaken, the story of Prophet Yunus. We know him to be the very famous prophet inside the belly of the whale. Fine, but look at God's approach. God's approach in dealing with this prophet, who didn't choose the best option. Wasn't a sin what he did. He became impatient with his people a little bit quicker than he should have. Okay? It's not a sin, it's just a moment where, you know what, it would have been better if you had waited a little bit longer. God realized that there was this level of frustration with the prophet, Yunus, so he put him inside darkness. There was no harm. He commanded the whale, don't go against your instinct and don't eat him or chew him or whatever. Just let him kind of slowly slide into the belly of the whale. Okay. That darkness paid dividends for him, for Prophet Yunus. In that darkness, in whatever the case may be, at that moment, فَنَادَى فِي ظُلُمَاتِ, the Quran says, أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ سُبْحَانَكَ إِنِّي كُنْتُ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. Oh, I find it beautiful. By the way, let me say this. I have to say this. This is that verse of the Quran that is part of Salat al-Ghufayla. Namaz al-Ghufayla, I cannot say enough, is one of the most powerful tools the Ahlul Bayt have left behind for us. Okay? Ghufayla, from ghafala, means heedlessness, is a namaz that is read between Maghrib and Isha. Meaning right before the night prayer, you are asked now to recite this 2 rakat salah, which isn't long at all, but very powerful. A lot of my youth asked me, said, Asad, what can I do? Give me some du'as, give me some tips. Any of my youth out there listening to me right now, if you want to up your spiritual game, then please include namaz al-Ghufayla inside your everyday life. Okay, you can hold your phone and recite, the the verses that are asked to be recited. After all, you have those memorized. By the way, this verse I read for you, وَظَنُّونِي إِذْ ذَهَبَ مَغَاضِبًا, that verse, that actually is in the first rakat after Alhamd of Surah of Namaz al-Ghufayla. But the beauty to me is that Namaz al-Ghufayla and its placement, I mean, it's not between Zohar Asr, it's not before Fajr. It's before Isha. Isha is the night prayer. Night is the arena of shaitan. Understand this point very carefully. The night time is where shaitan brings out his shayateen and now invokes all these things inside of us that aren't there in the middle of the day. Think about my youth, my young guys out there. Be real with yourself, man. 12 o'clock in the afternoon, you're having a conversation or you're watching something. At midnight, 1 a.m., are you watching the same thing or not? Your thoughts and what's available to watch at 2 p.m., what's available to watch and your thoughts at 2 a.m. Where you go at 2 p.m. outside your house, where you go at 2 a.m. outside your... Is there a difference? Oh, yes. There's a big difference. Something about the moment the sun sets and the night hits, that there is... It seems like shaitan now has released his army, go and wreak havoc on the hearts of the young. Allah realizes that, and now to protect that youth to walk into the night with an armor around him or her, he says Namaz al-Ghufayla. In that Namaz al-Ghufayla, beautifully, again, very beautifully, he says to remember the story of Nabi Yunus. And that story of Nabi Yunus is what? That this is a prophet that was in the darkness, and now some say 40 days, 40 years, whatever the case may be. In that darkness, he says, فَنَادَى فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ, Yunus called out in the darkness. He says what? أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ سُبْحَانَكَ إِنِّي كُنْتُ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. Glory be to you. There is no God but you. Subhanaka. Glory be to you. Inni kuntu min al-zalimin. I put myself in this darkness. I put myself in that position. And the moment that he now declares that, Allah says, we heard his call, we freed him, وَكَذَلِكَ نُنْجِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And we'll do the exact same thing with the believers. This is one of my most powerful verses that I am absolutely drawn towards. We all have our respective and our individual verses and du'as that we have. People are very close to Zarat al-Ashura, people are very close to Du'a Nudba, that's fine. And people have certain verses that call out to them. This one constantly reminds me what my responsibility is when either I'm in darkness, because sometimes I am, or what other people are. I just want to be able to come to that realization that, you know what, I need to now look inside of me. To not blame shaitan, to not blame everybody else, to not play the victim mode. Now mind you, yes, some people have been dealt a horrible hand when it comes to life. Abusive relationship, horrible parents, right? The whole world has left them, but there are some people who are blessed upon blessed upon blessed. They somehow now preemptively sabotage everything they have, or they have the victim mode down packed. Nothing is ever good enough. They expect everything from the world and nothing from themselves. And they do, I'm sorry, what shaitan did initially. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kicked him out of the kingdom, he says, فَبِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي, to God. Look at the himmat of shaitan. This is what? Your fault, shaitan. God. This is God. This is your fault, God. I'm leaving. I'm out. You kicked me out, fine. But I will not leave until I tell you, you caused me to do this. You knew I wouldn't bow down to Adam, and still you asked me. This was all your setup. And that's why out of anger, he says, I will misguide them from the right, from the left, from in front of them, from everything that all of you have heard several times. And this verse of Surah Yunus, asked now to be reminded every single day before you enter the night, is to remind you and me that even in the darkness of the night, you can still take responsibility for yourself. Now, if you are somebody who can help another person in the darkness come to that conclusion, oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. But you have to have the right approach. Okay? You can't walk in and be somebody who's not sympathizing. You can't walk in and pretend like, you know what, if only you did this. And no, not at all. Understand where they're, if you can pick up clues, or they can outright tell you, like, I was burned by a bunch of friends, or sometimes, you know, I have an enormous amount of self-love issues, then so be it. Because I find that those people who are not able to crawl themselves out of a dark hole are people who believe they can't crawl themselves out of a dark hole, who are riddled with hopelessness. And I'll say something, and many of you may not like it. Sometimes the only person that can get you out of that dark hole is you. This expectation for everyone else to somehow know what I'm going through sometimes is absurd, and it's bound to create disappointment. Even your closest ones, even the ones you're waiting for someone to come and rescue me, come and rescue me, come and rescue me. Nobody's going to come and rescue you. They're going through their own dark hole. They're going through their own issues. How could they? That's where the inner strength comes in. That's where that resolve comes in. That's where, in the darkest portion of the whale, Yunus now says, this was me. I take full responsibility. God says, that's what I wanted. Now let's go. I'll help you get out. Is that the example I give? I'm sorry. An example I give of teaching a child, a young baby, how to walk. My young parents out there who have young kids, teaching a child how to walk, you put the kid 10 feet away, you call him towards you, you have, I don't know, a rattle, you have a candy, you have a toy, something that the kid wants. He looks at eyes wide open, and now he balances out now, he's up, and now he walks towards you. Takes that first step, stops, kind of wobbles, goes back and forth, takes a second step, you're like, yeah, come on, you can do it. And just when he's about to fall, you grab the kid. You don't let him fall. Oh, but you only grab the kid after he's made 1 or 2 steps. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is no different. It's no different. He wants you to begin to crawl out of your dark space. Crawl out of your darkness. Make the moves that you need to make. If right now you're in a pandemic, you're locked down, I need that social, I need to leave the house, then strap on your boots, put on 8,000 layers and brave that Edmonton cold and go for a walk. I'm doing it. I don't like it. It's my face is frozen, but I need to get out. That's the step. If that means that, you get in you get in a car, you pick up, let's say, for example, some dinner, you drop it off at your friend's house, 6 feet apart now from the door, just want to say salam, here's some dinner, see their face, they see yours. It's very refreshing. Whatever the case may be, God will not let you fall, but the initial step has to come from you. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. The one who has taqwa, the one who has taqwa, I will grant them a makhraj, an outlet, a solution. But the shart and the condition is وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ. You have to show a little bit of piety. Meaning what? The first qadam, the first step comes from you. The first step has to come from the child. Every ounce of energy that kid has, he takes that first step and then you grab him. You're not going to grab him before that, right? It doesn't make sense. And all of a sudden now you have this newfound, if you can help somebody take that first step, that would be great. That would be great. But it's got to be the right approach. It has to be the right approach. It seems as if from the ahadith and from the ayat of the Quran, the first step has to come. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهِدُوا فِينَا. The one who struggles in our way. فِينَا, in our way. لِنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Allah says, I open up the path for you. But the initial is وَالَّذِينَ جَاهِدُوا فِينَا. The one who struggles in our path. The one who struggles in our path. Struggle first, and then Allah opens up doors. He's not going to sit there, open up doors, sitting there in self-loathing, self-victim mode, saying, boo-hoo me, where is everybody else? Where's my siblings? Where's my spouse? Where are my kids? Where's that community that I love so much? They know I'm drowning. They know I'm... No. So yeah, if you do get that hand, accept it. I think sometimes what ends up happening is that it goes both ways, right? People who want to empathize, they hesitate because the person is not really good at accepting that. If you have somebody calling out to you, reaching out to you, trying to balance out the right words, not be insensitive, not be intruding. Appreciate that. Open up the door for them. Make it easier for them. I find that sometimes people, they want to see others grovel and ask 1,000 times and then I'll let you in. Why, Baba? The person came to you once. It's enough. It's important that we understand these two very important points. Inshallah, I will continue this discussion tomorrow night as well. But two important points. Number one is the power of listening. The power of listening. Okay? To ensure that we understand the power of listening. Number two is to understand, and it goes both ways, like I said, to understand where the person's coming from, number one, and number two is to actually sit there and, if you're someone who is in that darkness, to accept that hand as well. Accept that help as well. Know that, while you're waiting for God to help you, meanwhile, God sent you 2 or 3 different sources of help, and we never realized we closed the door on that hand. It doesn't work like that. And all of this is for us now to be able to adopt the Sayyida of Sayyida Fatimah. And we're talking about that woman now who saw everything in her life. The death of her mother at a very young age. The difficulty that her father faced in Mecca, especially in Shib Abu Talib. The wars in Medina. Then, of course, the loneliness and the tanha'i of her husband, Amir al-Mu'mineen. Khutbah Shaqiyya now addresses this very openly. The pain of Amir al-Mu'mineen. A bone in my throat, an arrow in my eye. How I spent those in the era of the 3 Khulafa. The old died off, the young became old. I was waiting for my God-given rights. If I pull out the Zulfiqar and fight for my khilafat, they'll say Ali is hungry for power. If I remain quiet, they'll say Ali is scared of death. Imagine what position he was in. And the one who stood right beside him was Fatimah. The birth of her son Hussein alayhi salam. And getting that news from Jibreel. Knowing that nobody will be there beside Hussein except for Zainab. All this in 18 years. I ask any of my sisters who are 17, 18 years old, stop and imagine, just try to fathom going through one dimension of Fatimah's life, forget all of it. And yet at the same time, we see that she never lost sight of God. Even in her khutbah, Fadak, which is a beautiful khutbah. One day, someday, inshallah, we'll go through it line by line. But that moment in the masjid now, across from the people who are responsible for this emotion. And for the first time now, she's addressing these individuals who took this gift from her father away. Imagine the anger. And the book says she was angry. But the first thing she does is she praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahu Akbar. My salams to you, Shahzadi Konain. My salams to you. That level of emotional intelligence and not lose sight of the purpose and not lose sight of God is such a message for you and I. In her musa'ib, in her musibah, there are so many different things that are so difficult to understand. Where I left the masa'ib last time was what? Was that the ghusl of Fatimah was being done by Amir al-Mu'mineen. And all of you know, and I said this, especially in such a well-organized Jamaat like Edmonton, that where a husband now loses his wife, right away there's a team there that knows the moment a death happens, they trigger operations. One assembles a ghusl team, one gets the body released, one now arranges for the grave to be dug. All this now is not done by the husband. You go and grieve. You be with your family. You look after your orphan children. You shouldn't have to look after all of this. But my Muslim Imam was there in the ghusl khana, washing the body of Fatima. One side Asma, another side Ali. He begins to give ghusl. The kids now outside the room are crying. crying for their mama, crying for their mama. Asma, go outside and quiet the children down. Ali now is inside the ghusl khana alone, giving Fatima ghusl. From inside the ghusl khana, a shriek can be heard. Salman al-Farsi, the ghusl is done. Fatima is wrapped. Ali, Mola Ali, Amir al-Mu'mineen, you are Haidar al-Karrar, you are Fatih Khaybar, 35 in Badr, the door of Khaybar, Amr ibn Abdawad. What couldn't you do on the battlefield? Anyone who is synonymous with bravery and courage and strength, it's you. But I've never heard a cry like that from you, Amir al-Mu'mineen. Ali now crying in front of Salman. Salman, what do I tell you? I didn't know that Fatima's ribs were completely broken. Now the mayyat is prepared in the middle of the night. The Shahzadi, the daughter of the Holy Prophet, now buried in utmost secrecy now, at that moment, just like she wanted, in the middle of the night now, Ali and a few of his companions now go and bury Fatima. When the burial is done, Imam Ali turns to the Holy Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, please accept my apologies. When you gave me Fatima, when you gave me that amanat, she was sahih and salim. There was nothing wrong. She supported me. Every time I wanted to smell the fragrance of Jannah, I would remember Fatima. But now I'm giving that amanat back to you, Ya Rasulullah. Her face is bruised. Her Mohsin is shaheed. Her ribs are completely broken. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to accept this qaleel ibadat, inshaAllah. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to help us understand the Sayyida of Sayyida Fatimah and adopt that Sayyida. We ask you, Allah, those of our members in our family or our community or our equals in humanity who are suffering from the COVID virus globally, we ask you, Allah, to give them that strength and cure to fight this disease and this virus. And finally, Allah, we ask you, in the name of Fatima al-Zahra, to allow us the honor of standing beside the Imam when he comes. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. उड़ाओ खाक अज़ादारों के ज़हरा दफ़न होती है। उड़ाओ खाक अज़ादारों के ज़हरा दफ़न होती है। सरे उरियान हो यारो के ज़हरा दफ़न होती है। कहाँ है दरे कर्रार ने कोई ज़रा जाकर। कहाँ है दरे कर्रार ने कोई ज़रा जाकर। सुना दो ये मुहम्मद को के ज़हरा दफ़न होती है। उड़ाओ खाक अज़ादारों के ज़हरा दफ़न हो। खुले सर पीटते हसनैन है ज़ैनब परिगश में है। खुले सर पीटते हसनैन है ज़ैनब परिगश में है आती हुर्रे भी रो रो के ज़हरा दफ़न होती है। उड़ाओ खाक अज़ादारों के ज़हरा दफ़न होती है। चलो शाले अज़ा ओरे खुले सर आज मदीने में। چلو شالے ازا اورے کھلے سر آج مدینے میں دو مٹھی خاک ازادارو کہ زہرا دفن ہوتی ہے اڑاؤ خاک ازادارو کہ زہرا دفن ہوتی ہے چلے ہیں انبیاء سارے ملک کی فوج پر فوجے چلے ہیں انبیاء سارے ملک کی فوج پر فوجے ہے جاتے سب مدینے میں کہ زہرا دفن ہوتی ہے اڑاؤ خاک ازادارو کہ زہرا دفن ہوتی ہے اڑاؤ خاک ازادارو کہ زہرا دفن ہوتی ہے یا حسین یا حسین حسین یا حسین